on our session, Take Control of Exemption Certificate Complexity. My name is Mike Lott. I'm Senior Product Manager here at Vertex. My area of responsibilities is around our certificate management solutions, but I've also been part of our O-Series product management and our reporting. I've been with Vertex a little over 11 years now, and looking forward to spending the next 50 minutes with you. Joining me today is Renelle Murray. I'll let Renelle introduce herself.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. Renelle Murray. I am a sales or solutions engineer here at Vertex. I've been with Vertex for 27 years and counting. My role in the organization is really to help our clients or prospective clients evaluate the Vertex solutions to ensure that they meet their needs. One of my primary solutions that I work with is Exemption Certificate Management and the tools that go along with it. So Mike kindly invited me along today to provide the demonstration of the solution for you.
Thanks, Renelle. So we have a couple of objectives for our session today. First of which is, hopefully upon the completion of the session, is that you're going to understand how to go about and create an exemption certificate strategy. Look at the full complement of the services and software tools that Vertex can provide to you. Also, we're hoping is that you're going to be able to look at this and understand how you may be able to automate the collection, validation, and maintenance of tax exemption certificates, which is the focus today. Thirdly, we hope that you're going to be able to understand how you can launch your own self-service process so that your customers can be able to submit exemptions on their own directly into your ECM solution. And then we also would like to be able to, hopefully upon completion, is that you're going to be able to understand how you can set up automated notifications that can reach out to your customers to request back expired or missing certificates. And finally, be able to, when you leave the session, be able to understand how you can set up an online storage system for your exemption certificates and be able to retrieve those certificates as part of your certificate management process. Our agenda today is I'm going to take a few minutes and just talk about what's going on in the marketplace today as it relates to exemption certificates, both at the market level, or what we're calling the macro level, as well as what it is that impacts you directly within the tax department and the challenges that you face. I'll then spend some time talking about the specific solutions themselves. What is it that the products do? What are the things that the key pieces of the solution, and what you were able to get out of that? We'll then move on to really a good part of the session today. Well, Renelle is going to take you through an online demonstration. As we say, sort of a picture tells a thousand words, so you can no better way to understand it as to way to see it. And then we'll finally look at some of the services that we have that match and complete the overall the solution, because it's not just the software that goes along to create an exemption solution. And then finally, save some time for questions and answers at the end. So one of the goals here is that as we go through this and we talk about the different pieces of the solution, you're going to be able to learn how you can create and manage your exemption certificates, how you're going to be able to support compliance and audit, and then finally streamline your customer experience. The whole end-to-end of submission through tax calculation, through audit support. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges. As I said, there's what we're calling the macro challenges or market challenges first. A number of years ago, really over 10 years ago, in our last recession caused by the financial crisis, jurisdictions were running into trouble and trying to understand where they're going to be able to get the revenues that were drying up for them, as their tax revenues were not coming in, as different businesses were not able to be able to help support the revenue that was required for the jurisdictions. The jurisdictions took a look and saw that one of the areas that was ripe for them to be able to increase revenues was around their audits and sales tax audits. And being able to increase the number of audits, but also to make sure that they're being more picky or more specific on what made an audit successful, or what was an audit that was going to mean that a customer or one of their was doing wrong, and therefore potentially had penalties that would be able to increase the revenue at the jurisdiction level. So what happened then, as the jurisdictions were working through this audits, they potentially, when really what we're doing was they were continually to raise the bar on the complexity of that, because they saw that by doing that is that they were able to find that the specific users or particular taxpayers, when they were not meeting the requirements around documentation, they were being able to raise and charge more penalties and be able to increase their revenue. So from a seller perspective, or from a taxpayer perspective, the increase of these audits were continue to grow in visibility in their organization, because they were having serious consequences. And when we talk about really serious consequences, we're talking about financial consequences, because the consequences that come out of that, we're not just finding that a customer or a taxpayer did not submit the right tax for a specific transaction. Those penalties go across all of the revenue over the audit period time. So while doing there and increasing of that continued to increase the amount of work that the specific tax departments needed to do in order to make sure that they were being able to comply with the audits. So as that audit activity continued to increase, as we said, each one of the jurisdictions really controls what it means to be able to comply on their audits. So they're able to go in and identify or determine complexity as it relates to what it meant to comply with a specific exemption. They were able to change or add or increase the number of forms. They were able to add forms as it related to industry-specific versions, essentially be able to, at each jurisdiction level, change the complexity needed to be able to comply for an audit. This became and added more complexity at the individual taxpayer level and at the individual tax department level, which meant that the amount of work that needed to go on there continued to increase. And at the same time, because the audit penalties were continuing to increase, the audit reserves that many companies needed to put aside to be able to address any of the potential penalties continued to swell, again, impacting the overall financial bottom line of many organizations. This quote here is from the California Board of Equalization, and what they found was that unsupported sales or for resale was the second most costly and frequent occurring category of taxpayer noncompliance, so not having the right certificates. More than 1 in 10 taxpayer errors occurred in this category, and that this area of noncompliance made up over 22% of net sales and use tax audit deficiencies. So that means not having the right exemptions to support the calculations, and not having either the right or completed or correct certificates to be able to support the audits that the taxpayer was under. So from a tax department standpoint, what that meant was the ability for them to maintain all the exemptions that required exponentially increased. And when we talk about maintaining the certificates, what we're talking support for that, we're talking about maintaining those certificates. And it's not just an aspect of having a certificate, it's having the right certificate that a specific transaction was exempted for. And obviously, we spoke about the ability to not just manage one or two certificate audits at the same time, but being able to manage multiple audits across any of the jurisdictions that they are registered in and need to file their taxes into. At the same time, whether it may not necessarily have been reduction in headcount anymore, the amount of work that's going on meant more work that was on the existing headcount that was there, increasing the operational costs within the organization. Again, not just from a document management perspective, but also if being able to go back from a customer service perspective and being able to potentially adjust taxes on prior sales that had not been exempted when a customer should have been exempted. We would not be, the state of where we are today. COVID-19 is just going to accelerate the challenges that we were just talking about today. So while jurisdictions are continually adding and trying to battle the things that they need to do from a COVID-19 response, this is just eating into their budget and the potential revenues that they need to be able to increase that, to be able to address that is going to continue to increase. And like everybody, come March 19th or whatever, 16th, when we started working at home, most people started doing the work at home or work remotely, which meant a challenge for people who traditionally had a manual process or a process that relied on people-to-people interaction. So working remotely added to the challenges of a streamlined certificate management process. COVID-19 also is changing the way organizations work. There is an increase of merger and acquisition activity, which means does your exemption process fit into what may be a new partner or a new part of your business, and how easily can your process or their process integrate in to again support what you need to do from a calculation perspective as well as an audit perspective. So this is going to continue to play out, but will obviously increase the activity around audits from the jurisdictions as they try to understand what it is they need to do to increase their budget, increase their revenues. So why is this a problem? And I think most people on this session coming from the tax perspective understand that, but we do have some people that may not necessarily understand that what has made this such a big burden. And really what it comes from is the burden of proof lies with the seller. So the general presumption is that all sales are subject to tax unless the taxpayer can prove otherwise. And when we say taxpayer, it's the collector of the tax, the seller of the products who then collect the tax and submit the tax back to the jurisdictions. So it is up to the taxpayer or the seller to get the right documentation that they're going to be able to prove to the jurisdiction that a specific transaction should have been exempted. If that seller does not have the right documentation to prove that out, then they are liable for that tax mistake and are liable for any of the penalties that will come on top of that. So the burden of proof lies with the seller or the particular taxpayer. So I want to take a step here before we talk a little bit about what the Vertex solutions do, and open up a poll. and get some feedback from you in terms of what is your number one challenge when you look at your exemption certificate process. Is it around collecting new and updated certificates? Is it ensuring that you have the correct and valid certificate? Is it reporting and presenting to audits? Is it processing the tax adjustments for certificates that come in later or by mistake? Or is it really all of the above? So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds here to step through and pick one of these choices. Okay, we've got about 64% of the attendees. We're now up to 71%. 75. We'll give it another 10 seconds. We'll take a look at what the results were. Okay. So let's take a look. So the results show us that collecting new and updated certificates is a number one, is really the number two challenge outside of all of the above. So I guess maybe all the above was a little bit too easy to, but I think most people do realize is that all of these at some level are a big challenge and need to be addressed as part of a true exemption certificate management solution. I have another poll that I want to step us through too real quickly here. And trying to understand how much time does your organization spend managing your certificates in an average month? So we have this designated by hours, such as less than 20 hours, 20 to 40 hours, 40 to 80 hours, or more than 80 hours. So this is representing, the amount of time, the amount of effort and potential you could transmit this into the number of headcount that is focused on, managing your exemption certificate process. Okay, we're sitting around 70% right now. We'll give it another 10 seconds or so. Okay, so let's go take a look at what the results show. So it looks like pretty evenly distributed. Looks like number one is about 20 to 40 hours, so about a week out of the month is spent. But we also see is that we've got people that are greater than 80 hours. So it is pretty well distributed, but I think if you take a look at that and then 40 to 80 hours, you can see is that there is a lot of time spent managing the certificates. So being able to, how can you reduce that time period is going to be a key piece of opportunity for you to be able to increase your throughput within the organization. So let's take a look at the individual solution itself. So again, what we want to focus on is, how you can create and manage your exemption certificates, how you can support compliance and audit, and then streamline your customer experience. And I want to tie back to the benefits that you can get by being able to do those things to what we talked about earlier. So benefits of creating a proficient and well-defined exemption management process can help you reduce the errors and improve your audit performance. Address the potential ramifications and financial impact that you may have. It can help streamline your internal process so that you're able to adjust the changes that may come along from the jurisdictions as they make changes within their compliance. It can help direct the benefit of direct integration with Vertex Indirect Tax Solution can help avoid issues before they come around, so that what you're exempting tax for has the proof and is able to be pulled out as part of your compliance process. And then, as importantly, it's the scalability to grow with your business, whether it's growing organically or through some type of merger and acquisition activity. So let's talk about the specific pieces of the solution itself. So Exemption Certificate Manager, it really contains that centralized certificate storage and management tool. So within there, that helps automate the collection, validation, and maintenance of tax exemption certificates. So as we talked about getting the right certificate, validating that it's correct, and then being able to associate that tax exemption to to the tax calculation process. Being able to manage the certificates and provide compliance reporting. So when we talk about managed certificates, it's not just about collecting it, but making sure that you have the right certificate and that it is not expired. But then if it is going to expire, make sure that you're able to reach out to your customer and get an updated one before you are at risk of not having their correct certificate. And then finally, to be able to support the audit requirements to reduce the costly penalties we talked about earlier. We talk about supporting audit requirements, being able to run specific reports over time periods by jurisdictions and potentially by customers, and being able to pull those certificates and being able to present them. So some of the key capabilities that come with that is robust content. So I talked earlier about where jurisdictions are making changes all the time, whether that's new changes in validation rules or it's changes in forms. Being able to stay on top of that is something that Vertex does as part of our research and research department. So it's all part of our content that manages, views, and tracks all of those changes and has those changes be imported directly into the application so that you yourself do not have to maintain that and watch what's going on at the jurisdiction level. It also has robust content as it relates to the types and scope of certificates around, is this a certificate that is limited to certain products? Is it a certificate that is limited to a specific use, or is it applicable to all your types of transactions? It has a robust image management solution built in, but also can integrate into a document management solution for if that's a storage location for existing certificates. I talked a little bit earlier about correspondence management, so being able to run filters and be able to see whether or not a specific certificate may be expiring, and if it is, being able to send out an email to your customer asking them to submit an updated certificate so that the certificate doesn't expire. When it does expire, you have a new one to replace it. And then we talked about reporting, again, specific jurisdictional audit reports and non-compliance reporting, things that you can run before the auditor comes into the door or after they're in the door, being able to get specific requests from the auditor, add them to the filters, and be able to turn those reports around, including a copy of the PDF image that will show and prove that you are under compliance. And then this last bullet we talk about is around what we call our Exemption Certificate Portal, which is a self-service tool to allow your customers to integrate directly into the system and submit those exemption certificates via the web. Takes away that manual process that may be done today via email or potentially even be done still through a mail or fax process. So the Exemption Certificate Portal is our first mechanism for customers to be able to log in and self-service and submit their certificates. Additionally to that, when we talk about self-service, we introduced about 2 years ago a new cool tool called the Exemption Certificate Wizard. And what that wizard is it is an additional self-service tool that allows customers to create and submit an audit-ready certificate, including signature. And that the forms and content is continually matched and updated based on those changes. So what do I mean by submitting an audit-ready certificate? So through the wizard, the customer will go in and, based upon a series of questions and answers, guided questions and answers, it will identify the correct certificate to submit and then ask questions to actually complete the certificate correctly. This came out of when we were working with our customers as we have ECM and they were deploying ECM. One of the big pieces that was still a pain point for them was collecting the right certificate from customers that weren't necessarily tax specific. So a lot of times you're dealing with procurement people. So they didn't know which certificate they needed to be submitting. Or if they did know the right one, they may not have been completing it correctly. So the wizard takes a sort of that TurboTax way of being able to guide their customers the way and answering questions to make sure that the right certificate is submitted and submitted correctly. As I said, it is content driven. It is also configurable, meaning is that our customers can set up the wizard to match their business processes, what jurisdictions they're in, the types of exemptions that they will collect. It is also designed to be mobile first, so that it will work through a website on the keyboard, but can also work through a phone or tablet. So it could be deployed in store if it's a physical retailer, or it can be used through any type of mobile device. The wizard itself is also a SaaS solution, so it is a cloud-based solution that is maintained by Vertex and is integrated into our tax calculation customers, whether it's Vertex O-Series on-premise, Vertex O-Series on demand, or not written here, but as well as our Vertex Cloud calculation customers. So all of those customers can in with the wizard to streamline the collection of the process of collection of their certificates and getting those certificates right the first time. So real quickly, I described, how you're able to use these systems to create and manage the certificates, support compliance and audit, and streamline the customer experience through self-service. So now what I want to do is turn this over to Renelle, and she'll take you through and show you how these solutions all work together. So Renelle, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Mike. So let me share my screen. And let me know if you see a screen that comes up and says Bob's Discount Bolts.
Got it.
Got it. And you apparently can hear me okay.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through those three main components. The first one being the ability to streamline and automate the collection of a certificate. So I'm going to do that using the Vertex Exemption Certificate Wizard that Mike just described. To launch the Vertex Exemption Certificate Wizard, there needs to be a platform it launches off of. So most commonly, customers that use the wizard are launching this off of an e-commerce site or a customer onboarding site. So because we're all Vertex customers, or primarily all Vertex current customers, you may be familiar with My Vertex. That would be an example of a Vertex provided platform that we may use the wizard to collect certificates from you. Turn it around, put it in your hands, and it would be the same type of customer onboarding or platform that you're using to communicate with your customers, that it might be a good area for you to collect a certificate. So this Bob's Discount Bolts that you're seeing in front of you is actually my staging area or my backdrop for when I launch my Exemption Certificate Wizard, which gets done through a button or a URL, however you want to present it to your customers. But when I click the Submit Tax Exemptions button, it will actually launch now the Vertex solution, the Exemption Certificate Wizard. So from here, we come your customers. So again, I'm going to, from a perspective, from your customer's perspective, I would be your customer, and I'd be filling out a certificate through the Vertex Wizard to submit back to you and land in your O Series instance or your cloud instance. So as your customer, I would go through and select what jurisdiction or jurisdictions I would like to submit the certificate for. So I can click some states if I'd like to. I saw on the questions there was a Colorado question. If I click Colorado, it does have some locals. I hit next. We have a list of Colorado locals. So for some jurisdictions, Colorado, Alabama, Louisiana, some of those, there may be local certificates that could be collected by your customers for you at the local level. I'm just going to hit my back button because I'm not done here. This screen is configurable. So let's just say you're not in Colorado and you never want to receive a certificate from Colorado. This list of jurisdictions is configurable. So coming with you with the Exemption Certificate Wizard, you have an entire configuration dashboard that allows you through a really easy user interface to just simply say, I don't want to display Colorado to my customers. And your customer list would be Alabama through Wyoming, if you're just in the United States, without Colorado listed there. So this is a configurable page. I'm going to pick one state. I'm going to try to pick one that's a little bit I shouldn't say obscure, but I don't do on a regular basis. So let's do Oklahoma. I know I have a lot of good customers in Oklahoma. So I'm going to submit an Oklahoma certificate to you, the taxpayer. So I'm just going to select Oklahoma and hit next. The next question me as your customer is going to answer is, what is the reason for this exemption? Again, this is a configurable page. If you would never accept an agricultural certificate, that can be removed from this list. So this list can be limited to just the types of certificates that you would adequately accept from your customers. So really what we've done with just question 1 and question 2 is we've given you a configuration option so that your customer can't make a mistake and at least submit a certificate for a jurisdiction that you're not in, and or submit a type of certificate that you won't accept because your business doesn't allow for it. So 2 things, again, going back to Mike's conversation or outline on audit ready, these are the first 2 steps in making the certificate audit ready. We're deciding based on the selections, these answers to these questions, and I'm going to pick resale because that's pretty common. We're making a decision at that point. Sorry, I sat here too long. Let me just refresh my token and do that again. This is what I get for trying to be over-prepared. I was sitting here as Mike was talking. I'm just going to pick Oklahoma and resale. I'm going to hit next. And it's now it's told me based on those 2 selections, here's the certificate that I'm going to be creating. This is the right certificate to be submitted for an Oklahoma resale. Some jurisdictions, if I pick a selection, would ask a third question. It may need to refine, to Mike's point, what we've seen since the financial crisis, where this became a pretty big deal, through to now, was this increase in types of certificates. So there may be more than one type of resale certificate. So it might ask a second question: is this for biofuel, or is this for automotive repair? Is this for the telecommunications industry? So lots of things that Vertex is doing to make sure that we're driving to the correct certificate being created. Once we get to this point, you'll note that there's an action button. This again is a configurable field. So you get to configure if you want one of 2 things to happen. For Vertex to continue asking questions to fill out this certificate. That's a create action. So if you were to default it to create, I wouldn't have an option to do an upload. So there's the second option then, is upload. The upload option says, okay, Vertex, stop asking questions about the certificate because I just want them to upload a certificate that they already have. I don't want them to go through the process of doing more question and answers. It's a business preference. You get to decide on which of those options are going to best suit your requirements or your desires. Obviously, if we continue asking questions, the certificate is going to be more audit ready because we're going to drive to the appropriate questions that they need to answer, therefore filling in all the required fields, making sure that all of those good things are done. However, the customer experience here is going to be just a little bit longer because they're going to have to continue asking questions. Whereas the upload, the customer experience will be super fast, right? Because they're just going to now drop in a certificate image that they have, but that certificate image now isn't being reviewed by Vertex, and they may have missed filling out a field. So ultimately, you get to decide. It can be both. The one thing I do like to caveat here, if you do select create, which quite frankly, that's typically where my customers lean. They want that audit-ready certificate, and after they go through and see the simplicity of the questions that Vertex has aligned with the certificates, they feel like it's an okay customer experience to continue with the create. But there are some jurisdictions, Florida, for instance, is a state-issued certificate. Vertex could never create that. So even if you were to select a default of create, Vertex is smart enough, the Exemption Certificate Wizard is smart enough to know that, hey, for a Florida resale certificate, even though you want me to create it, Mr. Taxpayer or Mrs. Taxpayer, I'm going to upload instead. So a couple things here from a configuration perspective. For the demo, I am going to create because if I upload, my demo will be over. And we do need to use all 50 minutes so everybody gets their CVE credits. So I'm just going to hit my next button. And now it's going to ask me some further questions about this certificate. What is the reason for the type of, what is your general business? I'm just going to say I'm a retailer. Describe the nature of your business. I'm just going to leave it as retailer. And then describe the items that qualify for the exemption. Again, configurable by you. There's some really robust functionality when we collect the certificates through the wizard that will allow you, if you remember on Mike's PowerPoint slides, he indicated there's different types of certificates that could be set up within O-Series and the Exemption Certificate Manager. One of them was limited scope. And limited scope simply means that, hey, this certificate is only limited when I buy wrenches or when I buy, again, we're going with the whole Bob's discount bolts, so tools, but these types of products. If you allow your customers to select the product and you elect to, in the wizard setup, associate those product or product groupings with taxability drivers. So if anyone's using O-Series or Cloud, you'll understand the concept of a taxability driver, then we can create limited scope certificates. This is all optional. This could be just a blanket. I have one customer that says, I never want to ask them. I just want it to be anything they buy from me. And you could literally say anything you buy from ABC company or whatever your company name is. So there's a lot of flexibility here, but there is a lot of behind the scenes functionality that you could leverage if it's part of your requirements as an exemption certificate collection. I should say through the exemption certificate collection. So what I want to do here is we do have this little option, preview form, because we've answered a couple questions at this point. If I were to click the preview form as your customer, it will actually give me a preview of the form that I'm actually preparing. And you can see it's watermarked with the preview. This happens to be the multi-jurisdiction form that is being created, so it is supported. If they would have clicked multiple states, we would have multiple states on here and they would go through a Q&A process for each state, but with the questions consolidated as much as possible. So if we have like questions for different states, we'll consolidate that so we only ask it once. So again, giving your customer experience the ability to say, okay, here's where I am in my build process. Just close that down, hit my next button. It's going to ask me for my Oklahoma registration number. I'm just putting in a random number. I'm hitting next. It does ask me, is this going to be for blanket or single use? This is a very good example of if I answer the question, if I say it's blanket, I can go to my next screen. If I say single use, it actually pops out a secondary question. Just going to the Q&A based on the answer to the previous question will drive what the next question would be. For this, I'm just going to put blanket certificate, but this again goes hand in hand with we can now create a certificate that would land in O-Series or Cloud that would be specific to a type of document that were to come through, again, from a tax calculation perspective. Again, functionality you can or don't have to leverage. All right, I'm going to hit next. So now I'm at the end. I'm at my buyer information. So this is my information. Because I've logged into this particular e-commerce site, it already knows my company name, it knows my street address, etc. So think about you submitting a certificate to Vertex through My Vertex. When you log in, you have a username and password. That username and password is connected to your Vertex account behind the scenes. So when I log into My Vertex, it knows I'm with Vertex, it knows I'm Renelle Murray, it knows I'm out of the King of Prussia office. All that information from your infrastructures could be integrated with the Exemption Certificate Wizard to pull it in. So if they're logging in through your version of a customer onboarding site, like a My Vertex, or through an e-commerce site where they're in a logged in state and their account provo is already set up, this information can be pre-populated. Again, giving your customer the experience that they don't have to fill in. You already know who they are. If they're not in a logged in state, or this is a net new customer, this would come up empty, and your customer would then have the ability to fill this in. So I'm going to hit next. Last but not least, before I get to my signature page, this is optional as well. This does not have to display. This whole style sheet can go away. This whole screen can go away. But what we provided, this is actually an enhancement. So this is like an ECW, I don't know what minor release we're on, but .x version inclusion enhancement, where we actually have gotten enough requests where customers requested that they could upload additional documentation. So while we're creating the certificate that's going to land in O Series, if you have secondary documentation that you request from your customers or your customer wants to submit to you, maybe it's a photo ID, a letter, you actually can give them the ability to do a drop file. So drop in a file, and that will actually be then collected and sent back to O Series or Cloud for presentation to your tax folks to review. For me, I'm just going to skip it. And now I came to my signature page where it does give me some verbiage saying, I promise everything I put in here is true to the best of my ability. I'm going to date it today, and you are going to see me sign with my mouse, which I'm not good at doing, but I'll just scribble it down, and I'm going to hit my submit button. So I've just completed my certificate. I've hit my submit button. It will land in my instance of O Series. At the same time, it does, again, present the final certificate for your customer. There's no preview watermark. This one should now have my awful signature sitting there. But now your customer, if they want, could take this and download it or save it as a PDF, whatever they want, for their records. So we've submitted, we've collected, we've gone through the Q&A process, we've submitted it back to O Series, and now your customer has the ability to take a copy of this for their records. So that's the collection process. Let me transition over to O Series. This is O Series 9.0. So this goes hand in hand where now, instead of you as a tax professional, setting up certificates in O Series, which you can absolutely do, it's fully supported. Manual entry of certificates for somebody who maybe collects a certificate once a week might be a great option. Most of our customers are looking for the streamline, the automation, the efficiency gaining that you can get with an automated collection tool like the Wizard. But ultimately, that Wizard lands, that certificate lands under our certificate portal area of My Enterprise. If you're not on 9.0, you're getting a sneak peek at the 9.0 user interface. Certificate approval. And here's my Oklahoma certificate data today that I just submitted through the Wizard. So the timing is very fast. You do have the ability then as a tax professional, instead of entering all of this information in O Series, you can do one of two things. You can look at the high level information here, click the certificate and say approve. Once I hit that approve, it's going to land in our certificate area up here and start to give an exemption from tax. If I want to do a more thorough review, I can simply hit my view button, actually launch the image and review the certificate line by line as a visual. If it looks good, I can approve it again. Now, let's just say that signature is so bad that you won't accept it. You can put a note back to Renelle. Renelle, your signature is awful. Oops, I forgot signature, awful. Hit the reject button. And with configuration of O Series, it can actually send an email back to me as the submitter with this note as part of a letter or a letter batch or a letter template that would have some verbiage that you've predefined. It would insert this note, so our standard mail merge, and then provide an email communication back to Renelle that says, I'm sorry, whatever your verbiage is, I'm sorry I couldn't submit this, your signature was bad. Here's a link, go back and fix it, or do something along those lines. So you have some end-to-end automation available as part of the certificate approval process. I'm just going to approve it. And now it lands in O series. It comes out of my approval queue, but you never lose visibility. Whether you reject it or approve it, you can always run a report, or even through the certificate UI, the advanced searches, you could come in here and say, show me all my certificates that have been approved, and do a search, and it will show any certificates that had come in through the wizard, got approved. So my Oklahoma should be here somewhere. Oh, I have 3 pages of this, so who knows where that one is. You would be able to see that certificate there. Same with the rejections. Even though they leave that portal, that approval area, you would still be able to come in and see any certificates that were rejected. So you never lose that visibility. So that's the component where you can actually streamline the collection, have it land in O series, do some high-level review, and be done with the certificate collection process. Now, to round out the demonstration, Mike it was stressed very clearly on the auditability component of this. So we've collected our certificate, we've reviewed, approved it, it's in O series, it's providing an active exemption as long as the criteria of the transaction is applicable for that certificate. But now the auditor comes in the door and says, okay, taxpayer, I see you've exempted these 100 invoices, prove it. So again, to Mike's point earlier in the presentation, the burden of proof is all on you. If you've collected the certificate and you have not taxed, you prove why. So now, as part of the Vertex Exemption Certificate Management capability, under the certificate management area, we have this concept of an audit certificate report. And this report is designed to respond directly to an auditor's request. So the ability for you to come in and say what company you're getting audited on. If you're familiar with O series or cloud, they are multi-company solutions. This is very specific to O series because I'm in O series, so I apologize, no cloud references at this point. You can see my Vertex Exchange company. I have other companies here. I have divisions of companies, but ultimately I'm being audited on the Vertex Exchange 2020 company, so I'm going to select it. I'm also being audited by the state of, fill in the blank. So I'm just going to scroll down to the United States, open up my states, and I'm going to say Connecticut. And now I can do some fine tuning of what that request is. So, and that's all going to depend on what the auditor has given to you, right? So if the auditor has given you, let's say, a piece of paper that says these 100 customers, you can come in and say, okay, for this company, here's the customers, I'm going to manually select them, right? You can go through this manual selection process. If the auditor was kind enough to give you maybe a spreadsheet or a CSV file, you can actually, as long as the customer number is there, the account number, you can actually just browse out and upload a file into this particular report. And ultimately what's going to happen is whether you manually select your customers or you use the customer import, we're going to look at that information and we're going to say, okay, for this company, this taxpayer, for this state, for these customers, get the certificates, right? So I'm just going to hit my run button. I'm going to look at my audit certificate report, and it's going to give me a couple things. The first page of the report is just going to be a table that outlines the data that was collected as part of the certificate, whether it was manually entered or it came in through ECW. It's going to show me the high level information. And then the next page is going to be a copy of the certificate that you've actually housed or created as part of ECW as part of that record. So now, instead of running to filing cabinets or going to share drives that may not be indexed properly with naming conventions, now you can run a report based on the state, based on the company, based on the customers they've requested. And one thing I neglected to point out is if it is truly audit, which this is usually what it's for, you can do the audit date, the audit ranges. So if you only want to see it for a certain time periods, you can reduce the time periods. So a lot of flexibility to streamline the audit defense and audit prep work. We've seen folks use this for audits, both external and internal, but also use it for their own internal tax reporting. So this is a very versatile report. So I'll pause there. I see we are at 5:22, and I know there's a little bit left from a presentation perspective. Mike, I will defer to you. Is there anything else you would like me to show?
No, I think you've covered most of it, Renelle. I think there was a lot to try to cram into a short period of time. I appreciate it, but I think it gave a good high-level overview of what it is, and it's an area that other people can follow up with, hopefully afterwards, either in the exhibition hall or set up for
exhibit hall.
The exhibit hall, sorry. Yeah. Or follow up after Exchange, obviously, as well. So no, I think that's great. Thank you, Renelle.
No problem.
So hopefully we're back to the next slide here, which, again, just to reiterate, the overall solution helps you to create and manage your exemption certificates, support your compliance and audit, and also streamline your customer experience. So everything that I've initially talked about and that Renelle showed as part of her demonstration. Before we go to the Q&A, I also wanted to, as I talked about earlier, talk a little bit about services around this. So it's one thing to have software and that'll help you do and build out your process, but Vertex also can help you get started with this. And we offer a number of different types of services around exemption management, everything from certificate validation, where we can work with you to help validate any of the certificates you may have previously gotten in, that they are valid certificates that did not maybe come through the wizard. We can also help you in your certificate collection. So if you have a number of old certificates that you now know that you need to go out and try to bring back into the system, we do have services around that can help you get started with that around certificate collection. And even we do have the ability from a certificate storage perspective. So depending on where you are in the deployment of an exemption certificate management solution / process, beyond just the software, we also have the services that can help you start building it out and help you really make that service first class. So I know we are actually getting to the end, but I do have one more poll that I would like to reach and ask each person to respond to. So when you look at your exemption certificate management solution or process, what feature would you prioritize highest? Is it ease of use? Is it comprehensive reporting? Is it immediate access to data? Or is it streamlining your process and integration into your calculation? And I may have probably could have put in an above, all of the above, but I'm making you choose one here. So again, ease of use, comprehensive reporting, immediate access to data, and streamlined processing. Okay, I'll give another 5 seconds. Let's see what the results show. So it looks like number one, with about a little more than 50%, or right around 50%, is streamlining your process and integration. So making sure that your certificates are tied into your overall calculation, and then followed by ease of use. It's got to be simple. And then your reporting and access to data, which makes sense. The ease of use and streamline sort of go hand in hand, and then your reporting and access to data can help from an audit and reporting perspective. So let's take a look then now at our session summary. So after this, hopefully you're being able to see how exemption certificate software and services from Vertex can help you streamline that creation and management of your exemption certificates, support your compliance and audit, and in the meantime, reduce risk, and then also streamline or integrate into your customer experience to make it an experience that is useful for them, but also being able to make sure that you're getting the right information from your customer the first time. So we are at our Q&A. I know we're about 5 or 10 minutes over, so I think we can. There was one question that came up, and I did want to talk about, because I'm not sure we did talk about it earlier, which was around does the wizard and the creation of those certificates, does that bloat your database? And when we talk about the wizard, when Renell was going through and answering those questions, what's actually being stored in the database is actually just the answers to those questions. When the certificate is pulled down to O series, that's when the PDF is generated. The PDF does not get inserted into the database. The PDF is a record that exists within the file system, and the database points to that record. So, in fact, the certificate, when we talk about the certificate image, does not increase the overall size of the database as it relates from a PDF perspective. It's just an additional record. It also doesn't increase the size of the database that exists up in the cloud. I do want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So there are a number of questions that came in. I'm sure we're going to record those questions, and we'll look to get back to you with answers of those at the end of Exchange. So again, I appreciate your time. And if there's any questions, my contact information is here, as well as Renell's. You can reach out to us, or as we talked about, go to the exhibit hall, and there will be people there can answer any questions that you may have within the next day or two. But then after that, feel free to reach out to us or any of your contacts that you may have within Vertex. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of Exchange. And hope to see you in person next year.
Yes, absolutely. In person next year.